So today we're going to be installing a leveling kit by Eibach. As you can see, this is going to be the part number that we're going to be installing. It comes with just the strut. We're going to reuse the stock spring, stock top hat, and all you need is this clip, this collar right here, and the whole strut right here. And I'm going to show you guys how to install it. So in order to get the strut out, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take off this sway bar end link right here, as well as this tie rod. This upper ball joint is also going to have to come out as well. And that should give us enough room to pry down right here and slide the whole strut assembly out. Also, don't forget about these are 15mm nuts up top. There's 3 of them. Alright, so currently I got this sway bar end link nut off. That's going to be an 18mm. Right here is going to be a tie rod. It's going to be a 21mm, as well as this is going to be a 21mm. I did have to take off the caliper. As you can see, it's getting hung by zip ties across the frame, so it's not just dangling by the brake hose. There's no tension on this brake hose, so that's what you want to do. I unclipped this ABS harness. There's just a little bracket that it goes into right there, and took the rotor off. Yeah, I mean, we're almost there. We just got to take these off. And then you got to take off this nut right here. There's gonna be a bolt that goes all the way through the strut, and the bolt, you can kind of see it, is gonna come out that side, and then we should be able to pry down and take the strut off. Another quick note is these ball joints, as you can see, even though the nut is off, like, I still can't move it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a giant hammer and we're gonna hit right here, and this should pop right out. Luckily, this tie rod here, we got lucky, it just came right out. This sway bar end link again is stuck, so I'm gonna have to take a hammer and we're gonna have to hit it right here to pop these loose. So currently you can see that the knuckle is disconnected. All I did, you could see the marks on here. I was hitting it with a giant sledgehammer right here, and I hit it enough times right here and it just popped right out. So you may need a ball joint presser tool to get it out, but I was able to do it with a hammer, luckily. Like I said, the tie rod came right out. This sway bar end link is just about to be popped out, and right now the strut, I undid those bolts and I took out this bolt that was inside here, inside the strut, and now I'm going to take this giant pry bar and I'm just going to do this, push down on it like this, and there you go, strut is out now. Alright, so now that the old strut is out, what we're going to have to do, we're going to be reusing this stock spring. We're going to be using this top hat right here. You can see that this top hat nut is really rusty. It's probably going to be pretty difficult to take off. And then over here we got the new strut. So what we're going to have to do on this strut, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, you got what, 5 different settings. So if you set it here to the lowest one according to Eibach, this is going to be your stock height, and the top ring is going to lift it approximately 2.75 inches, and that's what I have the other side. I already did the other side, but we're going to do the top ring again. Honestly, that's going to give you like the most level look, and that's what I would recommend going with. So I got you can see the clip is seated. Make sure it's seated all the way around, you can't move it. And then you're gonna slide this collar down over it and then make sure it's all stable. Now we're gonna have to take apart this strut. Now you're gonna need spring compressors or a tool that you can use so that you could get the spring off and compress the spring and put it on the new strut assembly. Okay, well, I got that nut off the top of the strut. You can see the whole strut now is taken apart and the nut is stuck in the socket, which kind of sucks. But now I'm going to transfer everything over, so we're going to have to use this perch right here where the spring sits on. I'm going to hammer this off. Not sure that really does anything. We're going to have to put the spring on, and then we're going to have to reuse this top hat. And don't forget the bump stop. So this is how the orientation should look. You got your bump stop right here. You got this little cover right there. And then you got your perch here where the spring is going to sit. Now all we're going to do is put the spring on, put the top hat on, and then we're going to put the nut on top. This is where you're really going to need the spring compressors, because you're not going to be able to compress that spring by hand and put this nut on at the same time. So I just got the spring on. This is going to be the most difficult part of the whole job, honestly. You can see I got both spring compressors compressing the spring, and then I was able to get the nut on up here. Just a quick note, you could see the orientation of the top hat. It looks like kind of looks like a triangle, I guess, and you can see that this side is pointed. The pointed side has to be facing outwards. So this point has to be perfectly lined up with the strut right here, otherwise it won't fit. And the top of this top hat does not move, so yeah, just take note of how this is orientated, and that this should be facing outside of the truck when you put it up there. Another quick note that I could tell you guys is make sure when you put the spring in, that the end of it is right on this notch. Also up top, there's another cutout, and that has to be perfectly against this, otherwise it might cause some noise, squeaks, clunks, and you just don't really want that. So just take note of where this is. Alright guys, well, I got the new spring and shock assembly in. So what I did was I took this pry bar and I put it right in between here, this control arm, and then I just pushed down on the control arm really hard. I don't know if you can see that. It gives you enough room where I was able to slide it in, and then quickly just I didn't tighten these nuts down, but I did put them on hand tight so the strut assembly will stay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this bolt back in, and then basically just re-bolt everything, put the tie rod back on, put the sway bar end link back on, put the brakes back on, and that should be about it. So now what I'm going to do, in order to get this upper ball joint into this knuckle assembly, I'm using my jack, and I'm just going to lift under the control arm. And what we're going to do, just lift it up, got it in there. Okay, we're gonna have to go up a little bit more. Alright. And now I could get the nut through. I put the nut on this one. This sway bar end link, you can see that I'll be able to put the nut on there. And alright guys, you can see that we're all back together. We have the rotor on, we've got the caliper, we tighten those caliper bolts, tie rod's on, sway bar end links on, strut is on, these bolts up here are tight, this upper ball joint's tight. Right now I have it on the jack still. When you tighten down something with like a bushing like this, like where the strut goes to the bushing, you really want to tighten all the bolts when the car is on the ground, but right now I'm simulating that the car is on the ground by jacking it up under the control arm. So that's like as if the car was on the ground, and then I tighten those bolts up. So yeah, just I wouldn't tighten the bolts down with the suspension dragging. Tighten them when the car's on the ground, or if you use the jack to lift up this side of the car. I'm gonna put the wheel on and then I'll show you the after. All right, so I got the truck all back together. It's not completely settled yet. The front might look a little bit higher, but once you drive it around, it's gonna be level, like, perfectly. Yeah, I mean, this job, if you're gonna do this job, I would just say you definitely need an impact. If you don't have an impact gun, a strong impact gun, getting off those control arm bolts, you know, tie rod end bolts, stuff like that, it's gonna be a real nightmare. So yeah, you definitely need an impact. You definitely need something to compress those springs. I rented these tools at AutoZone. They were like $50 to rent or whatever, but as long as I bring the tool back, then I get it for free. I'll get my money back. The tools really needed though, you really don't need that many tools. You're mostly going to be using a 17mm socket, 19mm socket, 21mm socket, and a 24mm socket. That's pretty much about it. But this job really is not fun to do, honestly. Like, compressing the spring, doing all that, it's kind of a lot of work. And you know, just getting everything adjusted correctly is really annoying. It takes a lot of time. It took me probably a couple hours really to do this, and it sucks. So just be careful of that, you know, make sure you have all the right tools before you do this job, you know. Don't forget your giant pry bar that you're gonna need. And that's it. So this is what it really looks like. And truck looks really good. I don't know if the video shows it, but once I drive it around, it's gonna be perfectly level. And that's it.